Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a video for you about this little guy right here. This is the Scott Sawby Swift with engraving by Raymond cover. So first off, I want to thank Tony over at Everyday Commentary for, well, sort of lending this my way, I suppose. Tony is an amazing reviewer. If you don't read his work, you should. He's very knowledgeable about everyday carry gear, and he's somebody that I'm lucky to call a good friend. Recently got a chance to actually meet Tony, and he actually sent this home with me to make a video about it. Thank you for your generosity, and let me take a look at this guy. Tony, it's absolutely a beautiful thing. And thanks for your friendship, too. Anyways, next up, let's do a quick size comparison so that people know what this is. This is not big. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica, the universal unit of measurement, of course. And what we see here is sharpened length right around Delica territory, but it is a very small and relatively thin knife here. So this is very, very much not a huge one. And then I'll put it up against the only knife I have that comes remotely close to this. That is the ProTech Ultimate Custom Sprint, which is... yeah, also a beautiful thing. So this is a very, very nice, this little guy's very nice. Next thing, this is not going to be a review particularly. And, you know, look, I had seen, so Tony did a video, or I'm sorry, an article on his website about this in, I think, 2017. And it is best described as a breathless rhapsody to this knife on his site. And I respect the heck out of Tony. I really do, and I have for a long time. But my first thought when I read that was like, wow, okay, well, I see you're still on the honeymoon period. There's no way it's that good. And so I was, I remember thinking, I wonder what would happen if I did a review of it, right? Now, having it in hand, I get it. I totally get it. So rather than doing a review, here's a breathless rhapsody to match, right? This is, like I said, a knife by Scott Sawby, who is based out of Idaho, and it is engraved by Raymond cover. And I'll show you his maker's mark right here. Yep, right there, Raymond cover. So you can see that the engraving here is by Raymond, and that's a beautiful thing. And the availability of this knife is someplace approximating zero. The Sawbys are very hard to get. I believe Scott is no longer making them, and yeah, if the availability were anything greater than zero, I would be trying to get one myself. So anyways, let's talk about this knife and just talk about it generally. So to start with, one of the things that is really impressive about this, by the way, that blade, that's not like a visual glitch. That's the polish of this blade. This blade is incredibly high polished and very, very nicely done. But one of the things you're going to notice first off is like, well, where's the lock, right? This is not a slip joint, right? I can press on the top of this here and it is not going to close. There's not a liner or anything like that in it, right? There's no back lock. There's no tail lock, anything. The way that this lock works, this is a different lock than I have ever seen before. I don't believe this has occurred on any knives outside of Sawby. And what this is this little patch right here. When you press this guy upwards, like so, it actually allows the blade to disengage and close. That's how it works. On the open, you just pinch it open. And then when you want to close it, you press the blade up and it closes. This is a good lock. This is a really interesting lock. And the way that it's done, by the way, in order to press it open, you actually lift the blade up a little bit here. And so even if you were gripping on this, because I know you're going to be using this knife to break down cardboard and maybe do some batoning in the forest and whatnot, but this is a knife where even if you are gripping on this very, very hard, you're not going to unlock it because your thumb is going to be pressing down as much as this finger is going to be pressing up. So this is actually just a brilliant lock. It's almost a shame that this just doesn't occur elsewhere, right? And I'm very curious how it occurs on the inside. I was unable to take it apart because, yeah, but nonetheless, it's a cool lock, and it's not every day that I get to handle a lock I have never seen before. And so that is a really cool thing. Next thing, I cannot express to you the smoothness of this knife, right? This knife is ridiculously smooth. It feels very, very nice, and it feels... yeah, it's just really well done. It's incredibly smooth as you open it and you close it. It is very, very, very nice in that way as well. Next thing, the engraving on this, and I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can get a closer look at it. The engraving of this is very, very good. This is I believe, a Mackenzie scroll sort of pattern of engraving. It's kind of banknotey, remembering Tony's article here, but it is a very, very nice engraving job. It has lots of depth to it, and that's something that's often hard to see on video, right? But like if I give you this oblique angle, you can kind of see and you can feel the depth as you run your fingers over it. Really good engraving like this has that depth to it. It has a multi-dimensionality to it. Well, technically only 3 dimensions, but who's counting? Well, okay, moving on. But it has a dimensionality to it that's very hard to capture in pictures, right? You just see it on the table and you're like, oh yeah, cool, it looks like it's lasered on there. No, it's not. It's very, very much its own thing. And so the engraving here is very, very nicely done. Mr. Cover has done just an excellent job in doing this engraving, which makes sense because he's a very well-respected engraver. So there's that. Next thing, I gotta say, this inlay work is stellar. There's just no gap. There's very little, even up here, even at the very top here. The inlay just kind of disappears into the back of this. And it's worth noting, by the way, I'll polish this up for a moment. The back of this is also very high polished. Right, it is a beautiful polish on this guy, and in fact, you can actually see the line where the backspacer and the line is fit. Like, it's kind of there, right? You can just barely see it underneath my finger there. But in practice, unless you are looking at very high zoom levels, the backspacer is almost invisible to see relative to the rest of it. And the same thing happens over here. See, hey everybody, good to see you. This is an absolutely beautiful reflective surface there, which is great. That's very, very nicely done, as is the surface around the engravings, to be clear. The engravings themselves have a reflective border, which is pretty impressive. This is really, really well done. The blade on this guy is no slouch. We see here the steel marking is CPM 154, which is an absolutely solid steel for daily life. And very often, these kind of old school makers will tend to use like 440 and things like that because, well, A, you're not using this to break down cardboard all day, but B, you know, why would you go with something that's hot in a machine? CPM 154 is a very respectable steel, I gotta say. And the fact that it's, well, frankly, engraved, written on there as well as it is kind of impressive in and of itself, right? I mean, I'm zoomed all the way in and you can see there's a lot of resolution there. But the blade itself is great, partly because if we look at the edge of this guy, this is a ridiculously thin grind. I mean, the stock of the blade itself is relatively thin, right? If we put this up next to the Delica, we see that we are looking at Delica style stock, but the blade itself, the grind, is beautifully consistent. I mean, holy crap, look at the... that's just a really, really nice grind. And it comes down super duper thin behind the edge and comes down to a very, very nice fine tip here. They beautifully crowned the blade, by the way. The spine of it itself is very subtly crowned, but it is not flat, right? And so that is absolutely a beautiful thing. And every surface of this blade is mirror polished, right? He is missed nowhere. And that's amazing, except when you're trying to keep it clean on a camera here. Anyways, so this is absolutely great, and it looks great, and the engraving is great as well. The polish on this is amazing. It's just a super thin, beautiful blade. Next thing, I gotta say, look at this. This right here is the bottom of the self-lock. This is the surface that you press up in order to unlock the knife. See, if I do this, pushes the blade up there, and then there we go. That is beautiful. But if we look at the bottom of this, that's jimping. Or at least it's texturing. I don't think we're jimping anymore. It's just its own little thing. But even the texturing is beautiful, right? It's really hard to express, and I'm having trouble even showing this off on camera. But it's got like a prismatic sort of quality. It looks like a bunch of little diamonds on there. And so it is not just a series of... this is something that, you know, I'm not 100% sure. It almost looks engine-turned. I'm sure there's some fancy way that the old school folks are able to do it that I'm not even aware of, but it's just really good. And the fact that even this little part right here, even the finger groove here that you're never actually touching, is high-polished. But the fact that there's effort even right there is a beautiful thing. And the fact that you also have a little bit of scalloping to either side of that, which allows you to push your finger very readily in to disengage the lock, that's a beautiful thing. See the scalloping to either side? That's really nice. This is very, very well done. This is just a knife, and then the posts here fit beautifully. This is just a knife that is incredible. And I say that, well, yeah. I mean, there are a couple of little downsides, right? You can't take this knife apart for maintenance because there are no screws, right? That's not a thing that happens here. And the liners right here, my only complaint about this knife are that the liners here are very sharp. And I at first I thought, wow, that's kind of weird. But then I realized that, watch this. Now open the knife, and suddenly the blade disappears. Right? If I polish this up, yes, you can see at the very, very tips, just a little tiny bit of gap. But this blade becomes a contiguous part of the backspacer effectively visually, right? From the kind of distance I'm at here, it's very, very difficult to see that little groove there. You can just barely make it out. But that's why that is sharp. Because if it is sharp, then it can match exactly the sharp edge of the blade there. That is really cool. And so even that thing that was like, oh, I don't know, that's a bit of... Then I realized, like, oh, no, that's actually masterful. There's a good reason to do that, right? There's the little tiniest bits of gap there. But remember, this is a moving part, right? This is a thing that when I do this, has to pop loose smoothly and rotate out of there. That is wild. That is really, really wild. And this lock part doesn't stick up at all here. So flip-a-tab junkies, no, that's not what this is. But nonetheless, that is absolutely artful. And this knife, on the whole, is great. And more importantly, it's not just great. It's really, really great. When Tony first handed this to me, I recall saying something along the lines of, holy crap. And I don't believe I said crap. It takes a lot for a knife to make me feel that in 2022. I am, for better or worse, a little bit jaded, right? I have seen most of the knife world at this point in time, maybe less in the kind of old school cool sort of makers like this, but still, I have seen a lot, and this is a lot. This is an amazing, amazing piece. This is one of the best knives I have ever handled. And I say one of because there kind of comes a point where it's like apples and oranges, right? Where it's like, is this substantially better than that? Is this better? It's like, it's hard to compare. But what I am quite secure of is that I have never handled anything that stands hand and shoulders above this. And I am including here, by the way, going to, at shows, people selling the super high-end stuff in cases that I would never be able to own, right? That I could probably never even get one of. But, I have never handled anything that feels like, oh my God, this is way better than this Sawby, right? If there is a ceiling, put differently, this knife cannot stand on its tippy toes without hitting that ceiling. This is incredibly, incredibly good. I would love to someday see a knife that's much better. Makers, if you think you've got better than this, then by God, I want to see it, right? That would be amazing. But I really don't see that day coming anytime soon. This is really, really good. This is, to be honest with you, a level above my collecting, right? There were two different flavors of mastery here. Sawby made this towards the end of his career, assuming that his career is pretty much wound down at this point in time. And then Raymond Cover is an incredible engraver and has done this at, this is really, really good. And it's a nice reminder, more importantly to me, this is a nice reminder that the old school folks, that the Sawbys, the Covers, etc. of the world, they have not been superseded, right? It is very easy to look at modern knife making and go like, oh my God, this is amazing with computers, and there were levels of precision and tolerance that just were impossible to hold for many years. A, that's not strictly speaking true. Machinists have always been incredible, but B, this is its own thing, right? This is, the old school folks have not been superseded. They can stand shoulder to shoulder with the modern folks using modern methods. This is a good reminder that old is not code for bad, and that moving forward in time does not always mean moving forward in quality. I know for a lot of people that's very obvious, but I think for people who are just coming into the hobby and seeing the joys of CNC, computer numerical controlled mills and things like that, they are feeling like, I don't know, why would I bother with that? Like, oh yeah, this is why. This is really good. So this is, in case you haven't been clear about this, a really incredible knife, right? The knife is not for sale. I know that. And if I didn't, Tony would be getting a reverse ransom note right now. Like, we have your knife. How much money do you want? Cut out a newspaper, text. But Yeah, and Tony, I gotta say, I gotta let you know, I know you're a lawyer, you might have missed this though. There's a brand new law that just got passed in Massachusetts saying that you are not legally allowed to sell Scott Sawby knives to anybody whose name doesn't start with Nick and end with Shabazz, right? So I'm not a lawyer, but in case you ever do sell, you better not risk it and just sell it to me, right? Those laws are judicial overreach, but hey, you know, what are you gonna do with it? But look, in all seriousness, this is an amazing piece. I am thrilled that I got a chance to take a look at it and to share it with you all. I appreciate Tony trusting me to keep it safe for a little while and to do it justice on video here. And don't worry, I'll be careful in getting it back to you. So there you go. Hope I covered everything interesting and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. And that you don't forget that the old school can be just as good as the new school. 100%. So there you go. Have a good one, everybody. Bye now. I'll swiftly end this video. Bye now.